Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio with your hosts, Irene and Mark and Mark Johnson.
Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio, the flagship show on the Paranormal UK Radio network. I'm your host, Irene Allen Block, and with me tonight is my co-host, Mark Johnson.
Hey, you remembered my name this week.
I knew you were going to keep rubbing that in week after week after week. You're going to rub that into me, aren't you?
Well, you know, it does help to know your co-host's name, especially when you've been working with them for 7 bloody years. So, yes.
God, yeah, I know. Terrible, isn't it?
So terrible.
Yeah, well, Mark, I won't forget it again. So
Okay.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah, you will. Anyway.
I will, yeah.
We just real quick before we get into tonight's show, we just once again have to put out there and put our hearts are with the people of London and for this latest round of attacks. And trust me, there is a rant show coming for this Thursday night. We're gonna
Rant show.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're going to rant.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're
I've got a lot to rant about.
You always have a lot to rant about.
Yeah, well, this is true. That's why we have the rant show.
But mind you, this is a subject that's well worth ranting about.
It is. It is. Plus, you know, it allows me to get all the stress out of my system since there doesn't seem to be anything else I can really do about it. So a little constructive complaining does a lot of good for the body and the blood pressure.
Okay, so that's it, folks. There's going to be a rant this week, and Mark is going to rant.
Yes, I do. I'm very good at it, too.
Don't we know that? We know that.
Yes,
Anyway,
sir.
Mark. So, what now?
Guest? Let's introduce our guest for tonight. We're really excited to have on Andrea Perron is joining us tonight. For those who are not aware of her, Andrea is an author who's written a trilogy of books entitled House of Darkness, House of Light, which are based on her and her family's true experiences growing up in an extremely haunted house. Some of you may be familiar with it as it was turned into a movie a couple of years ago called The Conjuring. And so we're thrilled to welcome Andrea to the program. How are you tonight, Andrea?
Oh, I'm very well. Thank you so much, both of you, for inviting me. It's truly a pleasure to join you. I've got some British blood flowing through my veins.
You do?
I do. Actually, quite a bit. On my mother's side,
Yeah.
English, Irish, and Welsh.
Now,
and Scottish.
I'm English.
Scots. Oh, my God. Yeah. So
Andrea,
Yes.
I'm English. I have a Scottish mother, an Irish great-grandfather, and I live in Wales.
Perfect. Oh, my God. I think we're related.
I think we are. I really do think we are.
I have a mixture of all that in me as well, and I just call myself a Celtic mutt.
Oh,
Well, yeah.
Woof.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So I keep saying Andrea.
That's fine. I have been called so much worse, and I actually prefer that pronunciation. But in America, when somebody says my name that way, other people think that it's pretentious. Well, no, it's not. It's actually the very proper pronunciation of my name. So you feel free to call me that all night.
That's why we call Andrea's over here rather than Andrea.
Yes.
Is it Andrea?
Yeah, Andrea is another one of those.
It just doesn't ring over here.
That's like
know,
the whole
because-
American tomato.
Yes.
That's right.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Tomato
Okay.
sounds much more proper British.
I've got to ask you this, Andrea. Andrea. Oh my golly gosh. Andrea, have you ever been to the UK?
No, and I'll tell you, that's at the very top of my list. But my mother is really anxious to go to Scotland because she is associated with Clan Buchanan. Her her family came from the Buchanan clan, came to this country when it was still the colonies.
Yeah.
And she so desperately wants to go see the old castle. And I told her that I will take her as soon as my life settles down enough and I can get her a passport and, take her over, because it's very important to me, because it's so important to her. My concern about going to England is that I will never leave. And I think that's her concern too, that I just won't come back here. I am so drawn to the UK. I have an entire file folder in my computer of glorious pictures of all the old castles and some of the most breathtaking scenery anywhere in the world, from the Isle of Skye to the coast of Ireland to, everything England. I'm particularly fond of the Peak District, and I have good friends. I have a number of good friends, a whole family that live in Derbyshire, near Chesterfield.
Oh, that's nice, Derbyshire.
Yes, it is.
That's where Blue John comes from. The precious, semi-precious stone Blue John. Can only be found. That's the only part of the UK that you can actually get it, is in Derbyshire. That's where the mines were.
Well, I have to come and get my stones. And while I have the opportunity, I would like to say hello to my friend Steve Evell and his entire family in Derbyshire. He is actually the one that did some research for my mom, and he went and found the grave sites of the 5 remaining siblings. Only one came over to the colonies, and that's where my mother's connection comes from, the Ailes family. And he went to Sheffield and found their grave sites. I'm so connected. I'm paranormally connected to England, and I have this need to go, and this anxiety about getting over there. I need to temper some of my appearances here. I do a lot of UK radio. I've done a couple of paracons over there by Skype, which is really truly the cheapest way to travel. But it is it's so important to me that I get over there, and I feel my heart is particularly tugged because it's broken by the pain that you're suffering.
Yeah.
It's been very hard for us too. And I don't know when this will end, but I know that it will end. And the reason that I know that is because good conquers evil always, or none of us would be here anymore.
That's nice. Yeah, it's so true.
It's been a challenge. True. It really is a challenge with what we're dealing with in the world today. And the not only having to deal with these types of atrocities, but, the divisiveness between people instead of us working together to solve problems, and that we'll table that discussion for another show. But it's something that we're all going to have to work with to try to find a resolution to and come together. And this is why I like doing this show, because it brings aspects of the UK and the US closer together. Irene being based in the UK, and we interviewed so many wonderful British guests, and then we also bring American guests on like yourself, and helping to bridge that gap and making us all feel closer together.
Yes, I agree. And I think that, there's a lot of divisiveness even within the paranormal community politically in this country right now. And it's kind of shocking to me because it seems counterintuitive to me. I can't really reconcile it that, people who claim to be light and love and so spiritually grounded can also be vehemently opposed to the other side. It's something that I'm having to deal with myself personally. I've never felt this way before. I've lived through Republican presidencies in the past, and I never felt like this before. I feel that we are, I want to, rather than go off on one of my Trump things, I don't even like to say the name, but, the thing is, he does not speak or tweet for me. Let me just leave it at that. And I want to say that this is our opportunity. I think in some bizarre way, this one individual and his cronies have ushered in the paradigm shift, what we have all been anticipating as the age of Aquarius. This is a flood of discontent that is going around the globe, but it is also likewise bringing people together in ways that I've never seen happen before. And so, every now and then I get a wild hair and I'll throw something down on my Facebook page, and a few people freak out and leave. And I'm like, okay, sayonara. It's making room for, people who I perceive to be very spiritually grounded and who want what is for the greater good of the earth. And when we pulled out of the Paris Accords last week, my head exploded. But I have since looked at how we have galvanized the whole world around this. And, we've got states that are saying, hey, whoa, we're still part of this. We're still doing the right thing here. Ignore him, just listen to us. We're doing, including California, which is the 6th largest economy in the world. So I do have hope. I do feel very hopeful. And I think that this had to happen this way, or it would have happened another way. I thought that Hillary would be the rise of the sacred feminine energy and not only inspire the women and the girls of this country, but the women around the world. Well, she did. And we've come out in great numbers to voice our protest of what we see happening to our country. It's something that we all have to deal with, but more importantly, we all must stay engaged with. More important than anything is having the conversation, because what has happened in the last year and a half or so is that we discovered that there was an awful lot of toxic soup sitting at the bottom of a cauldron. And when the heat got turned up and it bubbled to the surface, we as a human race started addressing issues that have been ignored for too long. And so in that respect, I think that ultimately great good will come from this. I have to believe that, or I just don't want to be here anymore.
Well, from my perspective, and Andrea, here's what I'm going to say to you is there's a lot of what you say from a political standpoint. I'm kind of on the other side. But for me, it's vitally important that we can talk and we can work things out rationally, even if we disagree on political points. And I totally appreciate your point of view. And that is fine. We have reached a point in our society where we're not able to discuss things, and people are so, firmly planted that they don't want to hear or discuss or debate and look at things. And I look at it like, we need to communicate. And I think that's the most important part of us as people, because we're not all going to agree on things. And even if we're coming from opposite ends or even from out in left field, we should be able to talk to one another. And that's what I think.
And love one another.
Yes.
And love one another simply because we are human beings and we are all in this together, all of us. Mm-hmm. There's one race, the human race. Mm-hmm. And when we see how this division, how this chasm that has been created hurts all of us, I think that will be the real wake-up call. That will be the moment of awakening, and it's already underway. It's happening. And so anything that we can do to forward that momentum from either side of the aisle, from either side of the ocean, from either side of the pond, from either side of the world. We need to focus our energy there and keep it light, keep it love, keep it positive. And, and I do my best to do that all the time, because otherwise I will get sucked into the muck and mire of it. And I just can't allow that to happen. I think that, those of us that are enlightened, it's our job to be the light, to be the beacon, to give people hope and have faith that, whatever's going on now, however crazy or chaotic that it is, ultimately it will resolve, and ultimately we will all be better off for it.
This almost sounds like a rant show, Irene. we're almost there for the rant this week.
All the time you've been talking, I've been thinking about the elections coming up in the UK this week. Yeah. I am totally befuddled or whatever on who to vote for, because they all have good points and they all have bad points. And I just don't know where to go with it. I really don't know who to vote for.
And sometimes you could be like some of us who, when you have choice A, and I'm going to be very crude here, but this is the way I look at it. You have a steaming gooey pile here or a cold firm pile over here. Which shit do you vote for? And
the point is, they've all got something going for them, and then they've all got something against them.
Oh, maybe in the UK, but not over here. We have pretty slim pickings over here.
No, I think probably what we should do at this point, considering that I really don't have a kind word for I just don't have a kind word. So it's best that I not say anything at all about the predator of the United States. I just can't do it. And if
I like that. The predator of the United States.
Well,
I do like that.
And I know, and I'm going to assure people, we are going to be talking about paranormal stuff here in a moment. But, the one thing that with this will also segue into is the spiritual aspect. And me speaking for myself is the fact that I am human. And God, I have my faults. I don't like to say, oh, I'm enlightened. No, I can't say that. I think a lot of people who go out and claim that they're enlightened, that's their ego talking. And they really need, if you're enlightened, act it. And
if you're enlightened, your ego does not factor into your decision-making process.
That's it.
Right.
That's it. That's what I was going to say.
And for me, my ego will still shoot out there, and I'll shoot my mouth off on social media, and I get really pissed off, and I'll rant and whatnot, and even on the rant show. And then I yet have the other side of me really tugging at me to say, Mark, you can't do anything about it. It's not your circus, not your monkeys, and looking from a spiritual perspective, you've gotten messages that things are going to work out. And I sometimes,
this had to happen.
I sometimes forget that because I get so passionate and angry at things. And then at the same time, I have this, it's like the devil and angel on your shoulder, and they're both screaming in your ear. And you're being tugged in different directions, but yet I'm feeling deep down, we are moving into a positive direction. So, we can talk a little bit more about that later in the show. I think when we start talking from everything from a spiritual perspective. Can't get my foot out of my mouth here. So why don't we do this? Let's shift gears, and Andrea, let's talk a little bit about your experiences and what you and your family went through. But then again, we're gonna take this and it's gonna go wherever you want to go with it, and we can talk about what happened. And then how is it affecting your life today, and what are you doing today as we move forward? So tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and what happened to you back in 1970.
Well, ours is a very unique and an unusual story, and I did not even begin to tell it until 30 years after we moved away from the farmhouse. We were there. My mother found it in June of 1970, and we moved out in June of 1980. So for all intents and purposes, it was in our lives for a full decade. However, it's always been in our lives, and it will always be in our lives. It's the only place that ever felt like home to me. Everything else feels temporary. That was the only place I ever had a sense of permanence, which turned out to be false because I didn't want to leave the farm, and my mother insisted that we sell it, and it broke my heart. It divided our family. My sister Nancy was so upset that she went to the new homeowners and said she would stay on indefinitely as the caretaker, which she did, while they began work on restoring it to its colonial splendor. And we never lived together as a family under the same roof again after the farm. So in some respects, it was the end of the beginning, and it was the beginning of the end. It was...
That's so sad.
Yeah, it really is. Half of us never wanted to leave it, and half of us never wanted to look back. I fall into the former category. My mother told my father in the spring of the last year that we lived there that she felt certain that she would not survive another winter in the house. And my father finally acquiesced, and they put the house on the market, and it lingered and languished for 6 months, and not a single phone call and not a single viewer of the property. And it was very fairly priced. It was underpriced for the market. But it was because the house wasn't going to let us go. And it wasn't until my mother asked the spirits to release us that my father was able to make a deal with the abutting landowners, a very sweet deal for them to take the house. And we ended up all moving to Georgia, except for my sister Nancy, who refused to go and stayed behind at the farm. It was an extremely tumultuous but extraordinarily informative decade. Even my mom at this point, she's almost 78 years old, and she said, I learned everything that I need to know about life and death and the afterlife living at the farm. And it brought her back to her own spirituality because even though she was born and raised Southern Baptist, and she converted to Catholicism to marry my father, she was not a religious person. For all intents and purposes, she looked around the world and said, there can't be a God. How can there possibly be a God with all of this going on this planet? But in dealing with what she faced in that house, it created a spiritual connection. And I'll tell you something, whether you call it God or source or prime creator or Allah or whatever you call it, there is something truly divine in the universe that loves us dearly. And my mother connected with that. And when we were in crisis in that house, 3 words would stop it. God help me.
Yeah.
That would stop it every single time without fail. That stopped it. And so, as I said earlier in the broadcast, good conquers evil every time. Mm-hmm. And even though we don't always necessarily see it, and I'm sure that the families that just lost loved ones on a bridge in a marketplace in London might not feel the same way because of what's been torn from them senselessly. Their loved ones did not die in vain, because it is bringing the world together in a way I have never seen before. There is a wave of consciousness raising going on around this planet. And something had to shake it up. Something had to cause everything to bubble to the surface. Something had to cause people to wake up and face reality. And what we need to understand is that we do not live in a three-dimensional, five-sensory world. We live in a multi-sensory, multi-dimensional universe. And when we open our minds and open our hearts to that, it begins to create change that is irrevocable, that can only propel us forward in terms of our understanding of ourselves and our understanding of our brethren across the globe. And as that happens, what so many in the paranormal world call the paradigm shift, that is underway. It is firmly rooted. The Mayans were absolutely right. They said that the end of the world was coming in December of 2012. Well, it was the end of the Piscean calendar, and it was the beginning of the age of Aquarius, which they did not document, because I think my sensory receptors tell me they didn't think we'd make it that far. You know, the highly intellectual, highly spiritually grounded race of people, and they recorded the Piscean age, and that's over now. And the world as we knew it was over in 2012 at the end of that year, and we have consistently made changes globally that are opening people up, and you know, the rise of spirituality around the globe has had a profound impact on human beings, but it's also having a profound impact on the universe as a whole, because everything is one thing. And when we are able to wrap our minds, our pitiful little mortal minds, around the notion that there is one existence and we all share it. There is one mind and we all use it. There is one soul and we all express it. When we get to that point globally, you watch and see. And this is not something that's going to happen 100 years from now or 200 years from now. This is happening right now, and we are all part of it. And there are many who say that every one of us was born into it at this time to expedite that process. And I come down on that side. You know, there's a real difference between knowing something and believing something.
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right. You know, the world is going to change.
Yes, it's changing. It's changing at a rapid rate. And something had to set that fire. And it did. You know, so I try very hard to embrace the other side as much as I possibly can. Regardless of my, my personal or philosophical disagreements, I love everyone, and they have their point of view too. I just don't agree with it, but it doesn't mean that makes it irrelevant.
If we all agreed with each other, we'd be bloody boring, I think. Boring.
Yeah, we would. And you know what? And then things that needed to be discussed and needed to be changed wouldn't be. We would all be sheeple instead of people.
That's right.
And that's where the lines are being drawn now. That's where we are really coming into our own and our own understanding of ourselves. And a lot of people I have found have become extremely introspective, and I think that there's no better process and no more expedient process in terms of understanding our spiritual nature than to get silent and go within, because therein lies the answers. And so getting back to the farmhouse, we were a perfectly normal, suburban, middle-class American family.
So how old were you when it all started?
I was 12. When we moved to the farm. My mom found it when I was 11. I turned 12 that October. My parents closed on the house on the farm in December of 1970, and then we moved in 1971, January 11th to be precise. And it was a real wake-up call because we had visited the farm a number of times as a family prior to moving there.
Yeah.
My mother was so thrilled to just be buying one of the original colonial homes in America. This house, the land was deeded in 1680, and it was the house as it stands now was completed in 1736, 40 years before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So it truly is a colonial home.
Those types of homes, I'm a history nut, and for me, the older the better. I would love those old types of homes back in the 1700s.
Yeah. Yeah,
we got plenty of them over here.
Yeah, you had about a couple thousand year head start against us, so quiet. Anyway.
Yeah, you do. I mean, there are many. I think that one of the reasons why the paranormal is so widely accepted in England is a lot of people are living in homes that are 500 and 600 years old.
That's
and,
right.
They're encountering things there all the time as former occupants come to visit or revisit a favorite place or whatever. They just seem much more open to the idea.
I think we accept it over here as part of life.
It is, and it is part of life.
Very few people that I don't really know anybody, they go to view a house, they know straight away, you can feel it's haunted as soon as you walk in, but that's not something that turns us off over here.
Yeah, no, well,
because we kind of grow
here.
up with it all.
Yeah, exactly. But, we had never had any experiences of a paranormal nature. Nothing supernatural had ever, to our recollection, had ever happened to anybody in our family. And the closest we ever got to the word ghost was in church, when
Holy Ghost.
the Father was serving Mass, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, or the Holy Spirit. And the day, and we visited the house a number of times, and none of us had any experiences there that weren't perfectly natural until the day that we moved in. And it was almost as though they waited. I swear.
They knew you were coming.
They knew we were coming, and they waited and were very quiet and very subdued until the day that we officially owned it. And we moved in the middle of a snowstorm, and my dad threw open the back of the moving van and handed me a box and said, "Take this to your mother in the kitchen." So I walked it was freezing cold. So I walked into the door with it that was closest to me, which was the parlor door. And I took a right into the dining room, and the former owner, Mr. Kenyon, was there packing the last of his belongings. And he was standing at his dining room table. We hadn't even brought ours in yet.
I've got to ask Andrea, did he ever have any problems when he lived there?
I am definitely going to get to that.
Okay.
I wouldn't say problems. I never like to refer to spirit as a problem. In fact, I think they perceive us to be the problem.
So this house is nothing like the film, then, The Conjuring.
No, it's nothing.
Because I sat and watched The Conjuring yesterday just to make sure I wanted to see what the house looked like. If they had a house that looked similar to it in it. Was it anything
it's
like
nothing
yours?
like it. Nothing, not even remotely like it. But I will tell you that I have a lot of photographs of it.
I'd love to see a photograph of the house.
And, that type of thing. So, it's easy to find. And, when we're done with our interview, I'll send you some photographs that you'll enjoy seeing. But I walked into the dining room, and Mr. Kenyon was there, but there was another man standing in the dining room. He looked absolutely solid to me. And as I walked past him, I said, "Good morning, sir." And he did not respond to me. A moment later, my sister Christine came through the dining room into the kitchen, and she said, "Mom, who's that other man with Mr. Kenyon?" And my mother said, "There's nobody with Mr. Kenyon, honey. His son's on the way. He's not here yet." And then Cindy came in and asked the same question. And then Nancy came in, and she said to Cindy, "Did you see that man with Mr. Kenyon? He just disappeared." And that was
all of you sisters saw him.
4 of the 5 of us saw him. The only reason that my baby sister April did not see him, I think, is because Mom took her with her into the kitchen when we arrived. She was only 5 at the time, and so she kept her close by while all the other hoopla was going on in the moving of furniture and stuff, because she was really little and could easily have gotten underfoot. So it was, it was just a very interesting, as I write in the books, a very fine how do you do. And that was just the very tip of a very long spear. It was within a night or two that we were living in the house that Cindy came and crawled into bed with me one night and said, I hear voices in my room. And I thought she heard Christine talking in her sleep, which she did pretty regularly. And she said, no, it wasn't Christine. She said there were voices all around her bed, and she had covered her head with a pillow. And the more she tried to block it out, the louder it got, until she just got so scared that she threw the quilt off of her and came tearing into my room and hopped into bed with me. And so I asked her, what she was hearing. And she said she heard a number of voices all speaking at once. It all sounded like the same voice, but a lot of them all talking at once. And they kept saying over and over and over again, there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall.
Wow.
Now, there were rooms in that house that were sealed off. There were eaves that were sealed off. We never investigated or had anything done in terms of trying to find if there were. But, keep in mind that, this house was before the Revolutionary War. It existed through the Dorr Rebellion and many border skirmishes between the colonies of Connecticut and the Massachusetts Bay Colony, trying to take land. The Civil War came and went. The house was used partly as the Underground Railroad, getting African Americans to Canada. It has an extremely extensive history, and we only know part of it, what was documented. So it stood to reason that, Cindy was not dreaming this. She was not making this up. She heard it every night for 10 years that we lived in the house. Now, Cindy, when she was born, had a major birth defect and had to have surgery when she was 2 months old. And she passed away, and they brought her back. And we all think that that's why she was so closely akin to the spirits in the house, because she had already crossed over and they knew her. And so she was, my mother and Cindy are the ones that had the vast majority of experiences in the house. There was a spirit in the house that Mrs. Warren blamed all the nefarious activity on, named Bathsheba Sherman. But Bathsheba Sherman never actually lived in that house.
Do you know something? I was just going to say, who's Mrs. Warren? But I just realized who you were talking about.
Yeah, Ed and Lorraine Warren. They only came to the house 5 or maybe 6 times total over the course of a year and a half. And we lived there for 10 years. So there were many, many things that happened in that house that they didn't even know about.
Who did she? Sorry to interrupt, but who did she say? Bathsheba Sherman. She was the one that was villainized in The Conjuring as the one that was tormenting my mother. But chances are really good. Of course, none of them ever walked up to us and said, "Hello, my name is." That's not how it works. I don't think that.
But
I don't think there was ever a Bathsheba where you lived, whatever she's saying. I don't think that person existed.
No, Bathsheba Sherman absolutely existed. But she did not live in the house. She did have some connection to the house. And she actually lived about a mile away, as the crow flies, at the Sherman farm. She married Judson Sherman and had 4 children, 3 of whom did not survive past the age of 4. Only one of them survived her. which was very typical.
Is this I'm sorry, I'm getting muddled up here now. I should never have watched that film. Is this the one that they were portraying as as a witch in the film?
Yes. Yes.
And was she a witch in real life?
There is no documented evidence recorded anywhere. Not that, witches, practice publicly or socially. If she was a practicing witch, I'm sure that was kept very discreet. But in the 3 books I write about her, and I certainly do, if I am not her great defender, I certainly give her the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. But the spirit that was haunting and taunting my mother was very likely long dead before Bathsheba was ever born. When she did approach my mother and threaten her, she had an English accent. She was probably of the Arnold or the Richardson family that came over to the Massachusetts Bay Colony with the original colonists, and then followed Roger Williams to the colony of Rhode Island. And the land was deeded to the Richardson family, but the Arnolds and Richardsons intermarried, and eventually the place came to be known as the Arnold Estate. And it was known that way for about 160 years. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's she really copped all the blame, and the reason that she did was because when Ed and Lorraine Warren found us, and my mother never went searching for them, she never went looking for them, they found us through an odd circumstance. Where 2 young men and their team from Rhode Island College showed up at our house one day. Twin brothers, Keith and Carl Johnson, and their team called Pyro, Parapsychology Investigators.
Know Keith and Carl very well, yes.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know you do. And we still to this day don't understand how they knew to come to the farm. Keith said that my mother called him. My mother said, I never called anybody. I never called anybody. I don't know why they're here. But that aside, again, we've agreed to disagree on how it happened. It doesn't matter how it happened. It happened. And Keith is the one that told Ed and Lorraine Warren about our predicament. And they came in October of 1973. And their investigation was over in August of 1974, when my father threw them and their entire group out of our house because they initiated a seance that included my mother that almost cost her life. They brought a medium with them who, as far as I'm concerned, the seance that she conducted was spiritual malpractice. Mm-hmm. I was there to witness it. Even though I wasn't supposed to be, I did see everything that happened. And you do not throw open wide the doors to the netherworld and invite everyone in to determine who a culprit is in any particular home. That's just irresponsible.
That's not good. That is not good.
No. And
Andrea,
whatever it was that came through attacked my mother. The film makes it look like she was possessed, and Ed conducted an exorcism, and nothing could have been further from the truth. In fact, Lorraine said Ed would never have attempted an exorcism on his own. He was the only layman in the world at that point that was trained through the Catholic Church to assist with an exorcism, and he was so devoutly religious that he would never have done something so disrespectful as to take it into his own hands without the presence of a priest there with him.
And Andrea, I'm going to have to ask the question, okay? The Warrens, you were there, and you've also had many years to reflect on what happened with you and your family and their involvement. As you know, there is a lot of controversy about the Warrens over the years that does not put them in a very flattering light. I know a lot of people had a lot of respect for them for many years, and I've heard a lot of horrifying stories of especially dealing with Ed Warren. Now, I know their nephew very well, John Zaffis, great guy. Love John a lot. But, I have everything that I have read and learned does not put the actual Warrens in a very good light. What is your opinion?
Well, I will tell you the God's honest truth, and I told you before I even agreed to do this interview that there were no questions off the table and that I would answer everything honestly and spontaneously. And so I will tell you that that in all things there are two sides. Mm-hmm. And really, my interpretation, my perceptions of them as a child were that they were there to help us, and they didn't ask for anything from us. However, they were in over their heads from the moment they stepped over the threshold. And Ed, on his deathbed, asked Lorraine to find a way to get the story told, because he said of all the investigations that they conducted over more than 40 years as researchers, he declared that our situation, our predicament, was the most, and these are his words, the most compelling, most disturbing, most intense, and most significant of all of the investigations they conducted. However, they made some mistakes. They are, after all, human, and they made some mistakes. They didn't do it deliberately. None of us make our mistakes deliberately. You know, it's live and learn. But the problem is that when you're living and learning through something that is, you know, for all intents and purposes, unknown, that can be dangerous. And because of the learning curve that was such an arc at the farm, some of the mistakes that they made came very close to costing my mother her life. And so I have to look at this, you know, for what it is, you know, openly and honestly. My mother turned over her entire notebook. She had done a great deal of research on the house. Once she realized that the house was haunted and accepted the notion of ghosts and spirits, she, you know, extrapolated that out and in her very pragmatic Virgo mind said it's not, you know, spirits just passing through. They're attached to this house for some reason. They're not just, you know, visiting. They're actually attached to the house. And she wanted to know who they might be. So she began doing a great deal of research on the property and worked with the local historian, 2 historians, as a matter of fact. And even they got some things wrong, which I denote in the books. One of them being that one of the historians said that Bathsheba came from the Arnold family. No, she didn't. She was a product of a union between the Tafts, and which are also an ancient family in Rhode Island, and the Thayers. Thayer Street runs right through the middle of Brown University, one of the oldest, most well-respected families in Rhode Island. So even he had some of his information wrong, which I clarify in Volume 3. However, Mrs. Warren was so fascinated by everything that my mother had put in this large notebook that she had compiled all these records and death records, birth records, deeds and property and, you know, all kinds of surveys and, you know, everything that she could. Plus, every experience that she had, she recorded. She wrote down, she drew pictures of the apparitions that she saw in the house. And when Mrs. Warren saw that, she realized that it was a treasure trove. And she asked my mother if she could take that notebook and make copies of all of it for her research, and then she would return the notebook. And the notebook never, ever came back to my family. And in fact, I've been informed that it was sold as part of her rights to have The Conjuring made. So I know. And that's very unfortunate. My mother considered that a legacy. Now, here's the other side of the coin. When Lorraine saw that notebook and everything that was denoted within it, she considered it a haunted item. She thought that it would be dangerous to have in the house. And I think that she took it because of that reason and never returned it because of that reason. I can't read her mind or her heart, but I don't believe that either Ed or Lorraine would ever or could ever do anything to deliberately hurt someone.
Have you ever spoken with John to see if it's in his museum, considering that's...
No, I've been through every square inch of John's museum. John doesn't have it, and if John did have it, he would have given it back to me.
Yeah, I figured he would have, but it was worth asking, because I know whenever they got those haunted items, they hid them away in their own museum before John took it over.
Yeah.
I doubt very much if the book was haunted.
Yeah, me too, but...
I know, maybe that was just some kind of... excuse for keeping it, but she took a number of items from the house. And I've been told, even though I've never been through her museum in Monroe, Connecticut, I've been told by a number of my friends that things that I wrote about in the book are there in that museum. She did have a reputation for claiming keepsakes from the different...
Kleptomaniac by the sounds of it.
5-finger discount.
Well, you know what? She's an elderly woman. I defend her because it feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, but she wasn't elderly at the time, was she?
Well, no, she wasn't, Irene. I hear that hard edge in your voice right now. I hear it. I know.
Yeah.
I know it. It's unfortunate. The thing that was most unfortunate was that they were not well informed enough about how to conduct a seance to do it safely. And that was my biggest bone of contention with them, because I watched my mother being levitated at least 2 feet off the ground in the chair she was sitting in, and within a split second tossed from the middle of our dining room into the middle of our parlor. Everyone that was present in that house heard her skull hit the floor, and every single one of us were quite sure we had just seen her die. That should never, never have happened. And if you think The Conjuring is intense, you have no idea what the definition of the word intense is.
Well, Andrea,
I've lived it and I've seen it.
To be perfectly honest with you, and again, this is just for me, and I can say up front that I may be jaded because I've been doing this for so long, but I tried watching The Conjuring, and I think I didn't get past half an hour into it, and I just couldn't watch it anymore. Bored me to tears. But that's also my opinion of modern so-called horror films. They're all, I don't like any of them. They all seem very tame and lame. But that perception of mine could come from the fact that I've been researching the paranormal for so long. I've learned so much that things don't scare me like, that you're supposed to when you go see a true haunted movie, a horror movie based on a true story. I'm one of these idiots that runs towards activity, not away. So yeah. I guess that's my perspective of it. But I'm also having my own personal run-ins with Hollywood, and have been on a few of these shows. And God knows if you've heard any of our episodes, you've heard me rant and rave about what they do. And Hollywood, in most cases, they're not interested in the truth. They just want something they can market and get it out there and make lots of money on, and they don't care what they have to do it. So if the Conjuring movie, at least in, pardon the pun, spirit, is fairly correct, then that's better than a lot of the other movies that are out there, supposedly based on true stories, which are pure crap.
Well, there are elements of The Conjuring that are absolutely correct. And there are things in that movie that the producers, the director, the casting agent, the set designer could not possibly have known about.
Except through the book.
Yep. No, not even through the book. There were things that appeared in that movie, including the dog dying right after we got to the house. I did not put that in there. It was so gruesome and so terrible what happened to our dog that I did not put it in the book, and yet it showed up in the movie.
No, I mean in your mother's book, her notebook.
It's my book. My mom didn't write the books. I wrote the book.
No, I think what Irene meant is did your
no, it wasn't in there. No, it was not in there. I have a picture sitting right here in my office of a white cat, a folk art cat, and there's a scene in the movie where the camera pans around into my bedroom. The young lady who played me, Shanley Caswell, in the movie, lovely, lovely young woman. And that exact same picture is sitting up on the mantel board of the fireplace in the room. There is absolutely no conceivable way that they could have known about that. No one knew about it. It wasn't written about in the books. There were no photographs of it anywhere. And yet, out of all the artwork that they could have chosen, and it could be paint by number for all I know, but it's sitting up there on the mantel board, and it blew me back in my chair when I saw that that's what they had in my bedroom. And it was given to me for my 13th birthday by my mother's friend, Fran, when we lived at the farm. And we were out scouring a roadside flea market in Foster, the next town over in Rhode Island. And I saw that cat and fell in love with that. And it was 50 cents. And my mother didn't have 50 cents to buy it for me for my birthday. And Fran bought it for me instead. And I've had it with me ever since.
So did you have that cat was actually in the house when they were investigating the house and taking photographs?
No.
No?
Well, yes, it was, but it was not out. It was not
not on display.
Right. It was not on display at the time. And for some reason, and I don't know why, I never hung it in my bedroom. I always kept it, I don't know why. I always kept it in a closet, and I loved it. But that was the closet that I would go sit in when I wanted to be quiet and away and alone. And so it was like my companion, and it was nothing that either of them ever saw. So it was very strange, very strange.
It's one of those synchronicities that happen in life, something behind the scenes in the universe coming together to make it happen.
It's the cosmic kisses that tell me that even though the portrayal of our family is not accurate in The Conjuring, that it's okay, because there was no way for them to compress 10 years into 2 hours. Absolutely no way for them to do that. And frankly, James Wan was so terrified after reading my books, he wouldn't even go look at the farm. And they even actually had the rights to go film at the farm from the current owner. And he said he wasn't going in anywhere near it. He wouldn't even step foot in Rhode Island. They ended up filming it in North Carolina instead. And he was terrified. And in fact, the higher ups at Warner Brothers sent the screenplay back 7 times to the screenwriters and told them to tone it down, because they were trying to integrate elements of the true story with being that the film was based on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, which were incomplete at best and self-aggrandizing at worst. They really did try to integrate our true story. And every time that they did, the producers sent it to the brass at Warner Brothers, and they sent it back and said, tone this down. This will run people right out of the theater.
Plus, they also, and here's my cynical side, and I've worked in the industry for a while, they wanted to ensure they got that PG-13 rating so they can make even more money, because R-rated movies don't make as much, even if they're better.
That's right. That's right. And I happened to be with James Wan when the MPAA sent their rating down. And it was given an R. And oh my God, that man exploded. That tiny little man, just his head burst off. He had to be peeled off the ceiling of a convention center. And he said, call them back immediately. I want to know why. And the answer that came back was just a few words. It's just too scary. That was their reason for giving it an R. And he was furious. He wanted to know what he had to cut out of the movie to get it a PG-13. And they said, there's nothing that you can cut out of this movie that's going to change our minds.
That's ridiculous. I can get on a whole film movie making rant right there.
Yeah, but... I know it. I mean, there's no blood, really. There's no gore. There's no sex. There's no violence to speak of. I mean, there's no bad language. But apparently the rating board saw the film and it scared them so badly that they thought that it wasn't kid stuff. And, in that respect, I agree that, children should be allowed to be children for as long as humanly possible, especially in this day and age. But the sad truth of it is that once it went to DVD, anybody could see it. Anybody could rent it from a red box. Anybody could get their hands on it. So the whole notion of movie rating is just so antiquated based on the technology that we live with now that it's irrelevant.
Andrea, let me ask you about your own personal experiences. What are the types of things that you experienced while you were living in that house?
I never had an issue with the spirits in the house. They loved me. They were drawn to me. I accepted them. They accepted me. It was all quite natural. I think that's why I saw the first spirit as solid. And I often saw them as solid. I had several experiences where I would see like a milky, hazy mist or a gray mist as they were trying to manifest. I would see them as translucent sometimes, where you could see them, but you could also see right through them. But I was not frightened of them. To me, they felt like extended members of my family, which was odd considering one of them hated my mother and wanted her out of that house. I think that she was, she really lusted after my father, and she coveted us, the children. She wanted to be the mommy, and she wanted the real mommy to leave. And so, that was the crux of the matter there. There was a little boy, that was true in the movie, even though his name was not Rory, his name was actually Oliver, and he told my sister April he was her friend. And she kept him hidden in the closet, the chimney closet upstairs, and wouldn't tell anybody about her interactions with him, especially when the Warrens came, because she perceived them as powerful enough to make him go away, and she didn't want him to go away. Ed Warren was very, very concerned. Lorraine was too, about how vulnerable we, the children, were in that house because we were so susceptible to the spirit interaction. And of course, that a malevolent spirit has the ability and the power to morph itself to seem friendly when it's not, et cetera, et cetera. So Ed was very particularly concerned for us. Lorraine spent her investigative time primarily with my mother, and my father did not trust either one of them and felt that they were there to exploit us, and he was extremely uncooperative. And in fact, dismissed them from the house in ways and in using language that I will not use on your air. It was a horrific scene that night. That was really the climax of what happened. But
so your father actually threw them out in the end? Yes,
he did. And of course, that didn't quite make it into their files, which the writers utilized primarily to create the screenplay. It was, and it even says on the movie poster that based on the case files of the Warrens. But, they did try to amalgamate, they've cherry picked incidents from the books and from the case file, and then they literally conjured up their own third story that bears no actual resemblance to what happened in the house. It was, but I have to say, I must say that, there were elements of the story that were absolutely true in the movie. And in broad strokes, the impression that they left with the film viewers of the world who have seen this movie, they left several impressions with them. One, good conquers evil, love conquers fear, and the Perron family endured an extreme haunting that they all survived. All of that is true. But if you want the fine lines of the history of our family, you simply have to read the books, which is, that's a lot to ask of someone. I mean, the 3 books are 1,500 pages. It covers more than 10 years of our family life because I introduce my reader in volume 1 to everybody in our family and our close circle of friends when we were perfectly normal. And then not only do they get to know our family in that respect, but then they get to go with us to the farm and watch the transformation occur, which began, as I said earlier, instantly. Within moments of moving into that house is when we started seeing it. And Mr. Kenyon was an interesting old man. We loved him dearly. And in fact, my father, who realized that he was extremely reticent about leaving the farm, his son forced him to sell the property because it was so remote and his dad was so old that he was concerned about him being that far out, with nobody that could get to him quickly in case of an emergency. And so he built a smaller home right on his own property in the village of Harrisville and insisted that his dad sell the farm and move to town with him. But my father could see that it was breaking his heart and actually invited him to live with us. There was plenty of room in the house. He could have lived his days out on that property, and his son would have no part of that. So,
did he ever come back and visit it, or did you go and visit him?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And not only in life, but after death, he came back to visit us at the farm.
He came home.
Yep, he did. He came home. And, to this day, we all love him and we all miss him. He was a truly, deeply loving, kind, generous man. And it just tore us all up when he died. We didn't realize that he was going to come back and help us and be there for us, and we believe that his wife, who died in the house about a decade before we bought it, we believe that we had encounters with her as well.
Sorry, how many spirits do you think were there?
Well, at least a dozen that we could identify by sight. We saw one, my sister named him Manny, the one that we all saw the day that we moved in. She named him that only because he was a man and she wasn't, very creative with names so young in her life. Yeah. But chances are, and, like I said, we don't know for sure. We never will, not in this life. But chances are really good that it was Johnny Arnold, who it was the town historian told us that he died by suicide. But I know that he didn't die by suicide because of my encounters with him. He crawled up in the eaves of the upper part of the house with a bottle of horse liniment, which was, of course, predominantly alcohol. And he drank it, and he drank too much of it. And all he wanted to do was get drunk, and instead he got dead. But I know that wasn't, I can, that whole thing, I know versus I believe. I know Johnny Arnold did not kill himself. Yeah. Mr. Kenyon, the day that we were moving in and he was moving out, he, towards the end of the day, close to dusk, he asked my father to go for a walk with him, and it was freezing outside and swirling ice and snow and, but we were all hardy Yankees and you just kind of ignore the weather when you live there. And so they did. They went for a walk, and during their conversation, Mr. Kenyon put his hand on my father's arm and he said, "Roger, for the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night." And the way that my father interpreted that at the time, because like I said, the whole ghosty spirits thing was not even on the radar at all, was you're moving your 5 little girls into a new house to them that's very large and very dark. And they're all upstairs in their bedrooms, and there's one bathroom on the first floor. You'd better leave lights on so your kids don't come tumbling down the stairs. That's how my father processed that line, that information that was, delivered in a rather cryptic way. Over the course of the coming months, as we got to know people in the area, we determined that what he was doing was forewarning my father about something else, because everyone who we knew said that there was never a time that they drove past that farm in the middle of the night or the wee hours of the morning that every light in that house was on. It was always lit up like a Christmas tree. He kept every single light on in the house all night long. And I do believe, and my mother believes, that he did that to, if not keep them at bay, at least to be able to see what was happening.
Yeah.
Because he was in this humongous house all by himself. And, so I can really just imagine. But, I will say something that's important for people to know. And that is, it's actually a rather famous quotation that I wrote. To be touched by spirit is not a curse, but a blessing. It's that momentary, rare glimpse that we get into the realm from which we come and will inevitably return. So,
That's
even
nice.
all these years later, my mother, in spite of everything that she endured in that house, and my mother was physically attacked on a number of occasions, and Cindy was physically attacked as well.
And this is the female spirit that attacked them, yes?
Yes.
The one that wanted to take over Mother's place.
Yes, and we know that it wasn't Bathsheba, because Bathsheba died of a stroke. She died of the paralysis after having a stroke. And the spirit that was haunting my mother clearly, definitively had a broken neck. And she was absolutely gruesome. What they created for The Conjuring doesn't even touch how horrible she was to look at.
Well, the one that in the film was up on top of the wardrobe.
Yes, and that didn't happen, and nothing jumped on top of me and wrestled with me, and that didn't happen.
What about your sister getting her hair pulled across the floor?
No, they made that up, and they're conjured in their own minds.
I'm not going to watch that film anymore then.
Well, it's not it's actually an extremely well-made film, and it's I was very upset when I heard that James Wan was going to be the director, because I had not seen any of his films, but I did know him by reputation. And when I got a call from one of the executive producers telling me that they had brought him on as the director, I flipped out on the guy. I said, "You just hired the king of slasher porn to make my intimate family story. What are you people thinking?" I mean, I was furious. And he's like, no, you don't understand. He's studied the paranormal for years and years, and he's very well aware of, the case files of the Warrens, and he's, fast, and he'll treat this very respectfully. And, and I just didn't believe that that's how it was going to be handled, how the material would be treated. And it wasn't until I met James that I realized, that he is an extremely intelligent, thoughtful, sensitive, kind, masterful director. And the thing that all of us were most concerned about was that the 5 little girls that were cast to play us would end up being traumatized by making this movie. And James loved them and treated them with such kindness and care, that they're all perfectly fine. And in fact, the 5 of them bonded the same way that we did. And they all call each other all the time. And, they're their own little sisterhood, the 5 girls that played us. And in fact, it was very funny, because when I was, Warner Brothers asked me to do some promotion for the film, and also likewise simultaneously to promote the real story in the books. And so I went on a press junket with Joey King, who plays my sister Christine in the movie. And all the time I was with her, she was on the phone with one of the 4 saying, "I'm with Andrea and you are not. I'm with Andrea and you are not." Just taunting them. It was just precious. And the girls were lovely.
Yeah. Can I ask one other thing?
Sure.
Okay. The hanging tree, did that exist?
No.
Right. Everybody, forget the movie. Go out and buy the books.
Yeah, it was all.
If you want the real story, go for the books.
Yeah, the real story is far more intense and far more spiritual. I mean, this really was a spiritual journey, an excursion for our family, and each one of us dealt with it and processed it differently. Even though a lot of the experiences that we had were shared experiences, we're 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7, all 7 of us would have the same experience, but we all thought about it differently. I mean, there are so many chapters and sub-chapters in the trilogy that it's truly remarkable. And people who take the journey, I ask them to please suspend the notion of linear time. My books are very unique. They have to be read in a certain way. Volume 1 begins chronologically. Volume 3 ends chronologically. But from the moment that we step onto that farm as owners to the moment that we leave that farm as owners, all bets are off. In other words, I break it up into chapters based on the kind of haunting that it was and what the impact was on the family. So, for instance, there could be one subchapter that's about an event that happened to Cindy at age 8, but the very next story could be something that happened to Cindy at age 14. But there is a correlation between those 2 stories. And so it drives some people to drink. I mean, it drives them to madness because there are a lot of people out there that are linear thinkers. And what I tried to do was pry open their minds and say, look, just read all 3 of the books. And then when you close that last book, you will see it like it's running as a film in your head. You will understand why it was demarcated the way that it was, why it was recorded the way that it was, because this event pertains to this event, pertains to this event, and you actually grow, and it pries open human consciousness. And that was the point of it. I have received countless thousands of letters from my readers saying, at first I didn't know what to make of this. And then it was as though I was absorbed into your family and I moved to the farm with you and I lived all of these experiences with you. I dream about the farm. I dream about your family. I have this intimate connection with your family. And that's all because of telling the story the way that I did. Yeah. I was guided by spirit to tell the story. One thing that, we thought that when we moved from the farm, whether we wanted to go or not, depending on the individual, we all thought that when we left that farm, that we would be leaving them behind. And nothing could be further from the truth. I must tell you right now that profound attachments were formed and have persisted lifelong. Before my sister April died, she passed away in March, very suddenly. It just decimated us. I mean, it just blew our minds. None of us can even cope with the fact that she's not here anymore. It's like we're all pretending that she just hasn't called in a while, and yet she visits so routinely. Each one of us have had close encounters with her of truly profound nature, that she's not really gone at all. My mother said many years ago, there's no need to mourn the dead. They're not really gone. The farm will always be part of us. She asked, she was supposed to have some surgery in March. She had a compressed disc in her neck, and they made her sign tons of paperwork saying this could go very badly wrong. And so you have to sign off on all of that. And so a few days before she was supposed to go to the hospital, she went and visited with my mom, and she said, I'm going to leave my dog here with you, Sammy. And if anything goes wrong, I want you to know that I want to be cremated and I want my ashes scattered on the Nipmuc River at the farm. That was her last wish. None of us expected that there would be a problem. She had an excellent surgeon. We all just knew she was going to come through this with flying colors and get years more mobility. And the night before her surgery, she took her prescribed medication, and the combination of the two drugs that the doctor gave her stopped her heart. And when her my niece, her daughter,
they didn't tell her not to take her prescription then.
She took what she was prescribed. She took a combination of a fentanyl patch and oxycodone because she was in terrible, terrible pain, and the combination of those two drugs killed her.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
Thank you, honey. I've cried so many buckets of tears. I don't think I have any left to share. But she's not gone. She's not gone. And, you know, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I've had the experiences that I've had in my life, because I know it when she's with me. I feel it. You know, once I tell people I lecture all over the country and actually around the world via Skype. And I tell folks all the time, you know, we're all surrounded by spirit. None of us are alone. We live in a multidimensional universe, and it's, you know, there is no veil. That's something that we human beings have literally fabricated to try to create some distance between ourselves and the spirit world so that we're not frightened by it. But there's nothing to fear. You know, it's in the acceptance and the acknowledgement and the love and the unity between, you know, mortal and immortal that exists simultaneously that we come to understand the true nature of our being. And, you know, I was just up in Georgia. I spent almost 7 weeks helping my family clean out her house and her storage unit. Because my sister was a pack rat. She kept absolutely everything. And each one of us, because of that, got some treasures. You know, we'd all rather have her, but we at least have keepsakes of her. And part of her. And I was laying on the sofa one day. We had just come back from the storage unit, and I was just hot and tired, and I laid down under the fan and I fell asleep. And when I woke up, you know, in that split second when you come into consciousness, she was hovering right over me, kissing me on the head.
Oh, that's nice.
She knows the chaos she left behind. She knows the mess she left behind for us to deal with. And she was sorry about that. But I don't know that if I hadn't grown up the way that I did, if I would have even felt that. And Christine kept saying, you know, Christine's the one that really was most traumatized and most internalized what was going on at the farm. And all these years later, there are still topics that we can simply not discuss in front of her because she breaks down.
So Christine had a bad time at the farm then?
Yes, she did. She had a great deal of...
What happened?
Well, oh my God. How many hours is this show?
2.
Okay, not enough.
We can always have you back.
Yeah, well, and I'm always willing to come back because to say that we are literally just scratching the surface of this is the understatement of the new millennium. It was hard for Chris because when April passed away, she was coming to see all of us. I mean, she appeared in front of Cindy as a full body apparition the morning of her funeral. You know, I mean, all of us were having these incredibly emotional, beautiful encounters with her, except for Christine. And she wasn't coming to Christine. Do
you think that's because Christine went through some terrible stuff at the farm?
No, I think it was because they did not part on good terms. Christine was very, very angry about April's death. She felt that she should have been more careful with the drugs that she was prescribed, that she was reckless to take them so late at night and to take them without anybody there to oversee her prior to going into the hospital the next morning. just angry about all of it. Angry that she couldn't go to the funeral because my mother couldn't deal with it, so she had to stay home with my mom. Just angry, just harboring this pain. And so a few days before I came back down here to Florida with my first load of her belongings, since I'm the only one that has space to store her things, hasn't been dispersed among the family already. We were all sitting, it was about dusk, and we were all sitting out on the back deck of her house. And Mom and Christine and myself, and just having a cup of coffee and enjoying the evening. And we had just commented on the fact that the air was so incredibly still that night. Nothing was moving, not a leaf was ruffling. And right after we said that, the Rose of Sharon bush that is right next to the deck started moving in a very syncopated, very deliberate way. And Christine looked at it and she's like, "Do you see that? Do you see that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And Mom said, "Yeah." And Chris grabbed the flashlight and peered over, trying to, immediately come up with a natural explanation for what was happening to that very heavy, big bush, thinking perhaps that there was a possum or a raccoon that was trying to climb it or something. And there was nothing. That bush was moving all apparently on its own. And Christine sat back in her chair and she said, "Well, it's about time. Hi, April."
I like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we are blessed. We are all blessed to have had the experiences, no matter how difficult. We all got through it. And
you can tell me how. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Well, I was just going to ask. You ask your question, then I'll come in with something. I got something for you.
I was just going to wonder how. Like I said before, to Andrea, how bad were the experiences Christine actually experienced at the farm?
Christine had some incredibly close encounters, one in particular that almost claimed her life. She was placed in an antique trunk, and even though there was no lock on the trunk, she could not escape. She could not get out of it. And she was hyperventilating and she was suffocating when she was found. And it scarred her for life. Another one.
Was she in there for a long time?
She was in there long enough that she had run out of air.
Oh my gosh.
And the same thing happened to Cindy in a different part of the house. It actually happened to Cindy out in the woodshed, again in a wood box that had no lock on it. And yet it was like the weight of the universe was holding the lid closed. There were no air holes. There was no way for her to breathe. We learned very quickly not to play hide and seek in that house, that it was much safer for us to go outside with our sleds and run them into a solid granite stone wall. It was just infinitely safer to do that. But yes, there were instances that were very dangerous to our health and well-being. Not mine. My fear came from seeing my family, particularly my mother. I was very, very protective of my mother and what she was enduring in the house, and my sister Cindy particularly. But all of them, I became like a third parent. My sisters would come to me with their issues because they didn't want to bother Mom because they knew she was already struggling. And so they would tell me everything. And it wasn't until about 6 months after we moved into the farm that I went to my mother and I said, "Mom, we really need to talk. The girls are telling me things that you need to know about." And my mother was having her own experiences and not sharing them with her children, of course, because that would have been irresponsible. However, it was just something that none of us were talking about with her. And my father was king of denial for a couple of years because he was not he wasn't home a lot. He had his own business and he was out on the road a great deal to keep that roof over our heads. And when he finally had experiences that were quite literally undeniable, he, came around, but it was too late because my mother he and my mother separated emotionally because she felt betrayed by him because he did not believe what she was telling him and what she was telling him about what was happening to us. And he admitted 40 years later that the reason that he couldn't believe it was because it terrified him. And he felt like he had moved his family into a place that he had no control over the environment and no control over what was happening in the house. And it just scared him to death. But, you know, big, strong man, it took him a long time to admit that he was scared and scared for us. But I'll tell you, it was the acceptance and the acknowledgement of the spirits in that house and the respect for them that my mother insisted upon. Respect for the dead. Her attitude was this: it was their house first. We're the intruders.
Yeah, that's what I say here.
Well,
Now,
here's where I come in with the curveball. And you mention a lot in your talking tonight about multiple dimensional universe. You know, we have the universe is far stranger than we normally believe it is, and it's something that Irene and I, in our research, we definitely are on that wavelength. So this makes me have to ask: the spirits, for lack of a better term, that were in the house, are you convinced that they were all human spirits of people who have died, or do you think that there was something else there? And I'm not referring to demons, quote unquote. I'm referring to other types of entities.
Yes, all of the above. Check, check, check. Oh my God, we could do a whole show just about that. Yes, there was what some in the field refer to as elementals. There was extraterrestrial engagement and activity all around that farm. And I have spent I've spent decades in my own personal research trying to find the point of correlation and integration between living ETs and dead human beings, and the transition that they make. Because death, I believe, is just merely it's an event. It's the end of a vessel, but the spirit lives on, and the actual personage continues on. The character continues on. So, you know, in essence, what I'm saying is, if somebody was a nasty SOB in life, they are in death. And if they were kind and good and generous and loving in life, they are in death. You know, it's our personalities continue on with us. I think that Earth is a great, vast classroom where we come to live and learn and take this information and put it into the cosmos, into the collective consciousness, and then we move on. And, you know, I always thought that I never knew about, you know, I was a very intellectually precocious child, and I studied a lot of things at a very early age, including metaphysics. Was reading Emerson and Whitman and Thoreau when I was, you know, not even 10 years old, and preparing myself for life, preparing myself to go off to college and get a degree in philosophy, preparing everything that we do prepares us for what comes next. And I will tell you that my moment of epiphany is similar and yet contrasts with my mother's moment of epiphany. I had an experience when I was 17 in the house where I saw a full body apparition that was the spitting image of me as an old woman. Exact same features, gray hair, thick gray hair wrapped in a bun, wearing clothes from the 1700s, leg of mutton sleeve, long tapered, pearl buttons, full length dress, kind, loving, beautiful, looked at me as though I was the apple of her eye. And I never told anybody until we moved out of the house, because I didn't want them to feel the burden of what I felt then, which is perhaps that we are recycled souls and that we had been in that house more than once over the course of time.
Okay,
And
I was
my
kind of wondering where
mother-
you're going with that.
And my mother had a similar yet contrasting experience that was her point of epiphany. And that was one night when right after, it was like a couple or 3 months maybe after the seance had occurred, that had taken such a tremendous toll on her. And she was very thin and gaunt and not eating properly and trying to live on coffee and cigarettes. And she had not been feeling well, and she slept through dinner. And I made beef stew that night. And when I was working on my homework about maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I think I was 15, maybe 16 at the time. And she came out of her room and asked what I had made for dinner. And I told her, and she said, "I'm hungry." And I was like, "Oh, thank God, my mother wants to eat." And I had to walk through the dining room, which was all closed down for the night. I had shut the house down for the night. Had to go through the dining room, through the front foyer, through the kitchen, into the pantry. And it was before the age of microwaves, so I had to heat stew up on the stove. And she had asked me to make some coffee for her, which I thought was odd that late at night. But, she's a coffee addict. So I disappeared off into the kitchen, and I was gone for about 10 or 15 minutes preparing dinner for her, late night dinner. And she turned around to throw a log onto the fire, and she heard laughter behind her. And she turned and she looked into the dining room, and there was an entire family sitting at furniture that was not our own, having dinner. There was a woman that was stirring a pot of stew over a fire in the fireplace that had been closed more than 100 years when we moved in, sealed shut, and the woman was cooking at it. And she had a couple of children running around and was telling them to take their seats on their benches at the hand-hewn table. And there were two men sitting on the other side of the table, and they had pewter steins, which was indicative of the 1700s, because, of course, they were outlawed in the 1800s because of the lead content. So and she said all their clothes appeared to be handmade. So she's standing there on the hearthstone of the fireplace, just staring at this entire family sitting having dinner. And one of the men turned and looked into the parlor and made direct eye contact with her. And then he nudged the man beside him and pointed her out to him. And my mother said that from the expression on his face, he was the one seeing the ghost. She was the ghost.
Irene,
so,
you know my thought on that one.
Yes. So if
we've often said that, haven't we?
Dimensions exist simultaneously, then as she was looking back in time, he was looking forward in time. And it finally clicked. It made sense to her what was actually happening in this portal that was cleverly disguised as a farmhouse.
Yeah.
Well, we again, and yes, that's something that we've discussed many times about the idea that people
and experienced.
Yeah, well, you've experienced. I've still yet to experience. Bitch, complain. The idea that a lot of times when people think they've seen a quote unquote ghost, they're actually experiencing a form of time slip, where two events. Science is catching up with the idea that all time is happening at once, and it's only our perception of time that's linear. And in these cases, when people think that they see a ghost, they're seeing real, living, breathing human beings who just happen to be occupying a different part in time. And they see each other momentarily.
Which is why I wrote the books the way that I did, because I wanted my reader to be absorbed into the story, to suspend the fabricated notion of time. It's a machination of our minds. It doesn't really exist, and not the way that we think of it anyway. And so I wanted them to have that same timeless quality of feeling, of emotion in their experience. So I tell them, from the moment we step onto the farm to the moment that we leave the farm, just all bets are off. Suspend all notion of linear time. so that you can understand what it was like to live there, to not know which century you were in at any given moment. And I think that that's part of the reason why it's so effective in terms of expanding human consciousness. I have so many people write to me and say, you know, I had experiences when I was a kid that I never told anybody, not my parents, not my siblings, not my spouse when I got married. And since I've read your books, I tell everyone. There is a liberating quality about this story in print that literally triggers a release of that kind of information from a person that needs desperately to get it out into the world. And so if that's what I've accomplished in this unique recounting and chronicling of events, then I'm very proud to have done it and very pleased that it has touched so many hearts and opened so many minds. And not to get off the subject, but before we run out of time, I need to tell you about something that I am just as proud of as I am the trilogy. And it's a book that I wrote with my friend George Lopez, and it's called In a Flicker. It is set in England, and it is about, I consider it the only plausible explanation for why Jack the Ripper was never apprehended. It is a true treatment and a study of what happened, and it deals with CERN, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, and time travel, and learning about Jack the Ripper and what actually happened in that time in the East End of London in 1888. It has gotten rave reviews from around the world, and I'm so appreciative of that. The reason that I was able to tackle subject matter that was that difficult is because as a woman, I feel like it's important to acknowledge his victims. If you walk up, at least in America, if you walk up to anybody on the street and say, do you know anything about Jack the Ripper? Do you know who Jack the Ripper was? You know, the answer is an automatic yes. But if you then ask that individual if they know any of the names of his victims or what happened, you get deer in the headlights. And these women paid with their lives to make him infamous. And I thought that they deserved to be acknowledged in history rather than lost to it. So I put 18 months of my life into it and put everything else on hold to get In a Flicker out into the world, and people can get it if they've got the stomach for it, because believe me, I'm forewarning everyone. This is not an easy story to read. It's gruesome in detail. The worst of it is extricated directly from the annals of English history. But it is a fascinating tale. And I think, directly from the brilliant mind of George Lopez. I helped take his idea and turn it into a book. And we worked long and hard to bring it out into the world. And I think that from the depths of its darkness comes the light of true enlightenment about man's inhumanity to woman. And I think that it is an important study of that subject matter, and is part of my personal paradigm shift. And it has certainly affected many, many people the same way. So because I'm doing a paranormal interview in the UK, I want people in the UK to know about this because there is such fascination about your own history there, Irene. It's an important story to tell, and it truly is illuminating. But you're going to plunge into the deep end of the human psyche, and you will be permanently altered when you come up for air on the other side. So all forewarned is forearmed, and please, anybody check out our website. It's inaflickernovel.com. And my website for House of Darkness, houseoflight.com is old and stale and needs lots of attention. And I will be doing that as soon as I finish the screenplay for my 3 books. I have a 3-movie deal where the whole true story of what happened to our family is going to make it to the silver screen within the next couple of years.
Well, that's fantastic
now
news.
That's a movie I'm going to watch.
Okay.
The between that and what you and your family went through for 10 years, and you've written these books, you've relived all of those experiences. But let's talk about the later years. After you've moved out of that house, after you've gotten on with your life, have you had any other types of experiences? Has anything either followed you, or have you lived anywhere where you started experiencing other things? Or did it only happen when you were living in that house?
Again, we could do an entire 2-hour show just on what's happened to our family since then. Because when you are touched by spirit, it is a door that is kicked wide open that can never be closed again. It's been pulled off the hinges and tossed in the trash. And you can turn your back on it, and you can pretend that it didn't happen, and you can pretend that that doesn't exist. But eventually and inevitably, something is going to reach through and tap you on the shoulder and make its presence known, and you had better be prepared. I have been... I am supernatural. I don't consider it supernatural. I consider it natural. I consider it normal. I have daily interactions with spirit. I have daily interactions with extraterrestrials. This whole entire planet is completely surrounded by beings from across the cosmos. To say that we are not alone is... I think that the best way, the best way for us, we humans, we mere mortals, is to begin with this assumption. We know nothing compared to what there is to know. And once you're open to it, whether it be from exposure or overexposure or searching, researching, whatever it was that opens that door, you can never close it again. I welcome it. I embrace it. I have no fear of it, and I spend my entire life helping dispel the fear around it, because it's just merely another part of existence. And if you're having an altercation or a negative engagement with spirit, there's a reason for that. There are people that can help to get to the root of it, including yourself, Mark, including John Zaffis, including Keith and Carl Johnson, including Ken DaCosta and his team, Rise Up Paranormal, seasoned people that have been doing this for decades and decades, and that can help people. But very often I get letters from, I thought I lived in a haunted house and then I moved out and it's all still happening and I think maybe I'm the one that's haunted. Well, yeah, exactly. And that happens frequently. So it's, this is a field, there are no experts in the paranormal. Believe me when I tell you, if my family doesn't have the answers to all of these questions, absolutely nobody does. We were steeped in it for 10 years and we've lived with it ever since. All of us have. So, I think the worst thing that anybody can do is to proclaim themselves an expert in the field.
Yeah, we were saying this the other day on a previous show. There is no experts.
There are no experts in this field.
I've been in this field now for over 50 years, helping people, and even I'm learning every day. Every day. And all we have to do, the key is to just stay open to it. If you want to experience it, it's happening around you, whether or not you perceive it. So, we are all surrounded by our loved ones and our ancestors and, what some people describe as angels. There is life teeming throughout this universe. And when you open your heart and your mind to that notion and accept it, is when tremendous transformation occurs of a spiritual nature. We are all in the midst of spiritual ascension. We are all here with purpose and reason at this specific time to advance the course of humanity. And everything that I do because I deeply love humanity and all living creatures on this planet.
You mentioned earlier, both in when you're dealing with your experiences in the house and now, extraterrestrials. I'm wondering if you could, we have 10 minutes left in the show, and I know you could probably talk another 2 hours on that one too. But the
10 probably, yeah.
Yeah. How did you understand that you were dealing with some extraterrestrial influences in the house, and how do you still interact with it today?
I interact with them literally moment to moment. I have anywhere between 25, 30 sightings a day. It is because I can see extra dimensionally. I can see multidimensionally. They make their presence known to me. They love me because I love them. And it's a higher love. It's not even like human love. It's different. I had my first close encounter when I was 13 years old. It changed everything. Absolutely everything. I told you earlier about the experience that I had seeing an older version of myself from an earlier time. And I told my mother that about that as we were leaving the farm, moving away from the farm. We were on our way to Georgia. And I told her what I saw that day. And she said, Annie, I always knew we bought this house for you. Well, if that's true, if what my mother said is true, if her suspicion, her instinct or intuition about that is true, then it is likewise true that that was the place where I became engaged, truly engaged and enmeshed with extraterrestrial presence. I do not call them aliens. They are no more alien to this planet than we are. And in fact, we're probably here first and have known about it way longer than humanity. I think that I do believe, I used to say that everybody, if one person is psychic, everybody is psychic. If one person is a medium, everyone can be a medium. I used to think that for a very long time, but I've evolved on that subject as I've done my research as time has passed. And I think that there are most likely many of us on this planet that are hybrids, that we are genetically predisposed to seeing extra-dimensionally. And the science is really
I'll agree with you there.
In that direction. I am firstborn. I have blue eyes. I have the Rh negative blood factor, as do all of my sisters. We all have blue or green eyes. I think that we are, and I blame my mother for this. Although my father sees them as much as I do. I mean, he'll drive me around. If I see something off in the distance, I'm like, Dad, take me over to the side of the lake. There they are. And he sees them as much as I do. So, and my mother does as well. All of my family does. So it's, and I don't know yet the correlation or if they do indeed integrate. But as Nikola Tesla said, when we get to the point, and I'm just paraphrasing, when we get to the point where we are able to merge science with spirituality, we will make great leaps and bounds. They are not counterintuitive. They are connected. We are all connected. We are one. We are one race. We are one planet among many that have life. Most of the ETs that I have encountered or that I know of are humanoid, not all, but most. And so if there is one source, if there is prime creator, which is what the Pleiadians refer to God as, then we are all made in the image and likeness. And in fact, my belief is that each and every one of us is a living, breathing expression of God consciousness and the way that it sees its own creation. We're the way that God sees the world, through our own eyes, because each one of us are a piece of that whole. And that's my religion, for lack of a better word, my belief system. Some say, that I'm a witch. I get called a lot of things. I do, and I don't label myself one thing or the other because I'm everything. We're all everything. It just depends on to what extent we are willing to open our consciousness and to explore the depth of it in terms of cosmic consciousness and the collective consciousness. And so that's what gets me up in the morning, Mark, to get outside and go say good morning to the galactic family. And I love them dearly. And I have And I will tell you, I will give you some breaking news. I have a piece of physical evidence of their existence that I am having the forensics done on right now. Some of the best scientists in the world are unable to determine what it is, but they know what it's not, and it's not from planet Earth. And I will be revealing it at the Starworks Symposium in Laughlin, Nevada in November. Something you can hold in your hand. So here we go. Here we go. Paradigm shift, folks. Holy shift.
Holy
well,
shit.
that was certainly something. And it's going to be interesting to find out what that piece of something is.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
I've got one question.
yeah, we have 3 minutes left, so it's all yours. Go for it.
All right. Okay, you'll have to answer this one quickly then, Andrea, right?
Okay.
When you first saw me tonight and spoke to me tonight, you had a strong feeling that you knew me from somewhere. Did you have that same affinity when you moved into that house? Did you feel that you'd been there before?
Yes. Yes. And I recognized you immediately when Mark put up the banner for the promo banner for the show. And I looked at you. I was like, oh, I know her. How do I know her? She lives on the other side of the pond. You know, I haven't been there. I haven't held her in my arms yet, but how do I know her? And that happens to me with increasing frequency in my life. I have come across literally dozens of people. And, you know, the spiritualists, of which I consider myself one, believe we say that we're tribe. We're a clan. We're all coming together with purpose and reason to elevate the consciousness of the planet. And I know that I will meet you. I know that I love you. I know that we will be lifelong friends. And I know that I've known you before. Mark is like what the cat dragged in with that hat. Really?
I'm the afterthought.
Like, I need another cowboy in my life. Really? Oh,
Cowboy?
conservative cowboy. Oh, mother of God, please help me. No, Mark, you're a lovely, lovely man, and I just adore you. We've been friends for years, and I've known him for several years, and just an extraordinary human being. You guys are an excellent pairing. You really are. Very good. There's balance. You got the kismet thing going.
We take the mickey out of each other all the time, you know. Oh, but I was just going to say, you know, you said that you knew me before. I'm from the Mackenzie clan.
Ah. Did you hang out with the Buchanans?
I don't know, but you may have fought alongside us in many of the battles.
It could very well be. But I'll tell you what, I'm a spiritual warrior from way back, and one of my recurring dreams in my life that started when I was a little child was me standing at Hadrian's Wall and plunging a very, very large sword into the ground in front of me, and having thousands and thousands of warriors down in the valley fall to their knees. And I say only 3 words in this dream: no more war.
Okay. All right, then. And with that, everybody, we have to end the show.
Oh, we're out of time. Andrea, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a wonderful conversation. And
oh, I loved it. I loved every moment. I'll come back anytime you ask.
Yeah?
Fantastic. Well, just want to thank everybody else for listening to another edition of Paranormal UK Radio here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and we will catch you all next week. Irene, have a good evening.
And you. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.